For the Paradox Master, the cold and vast expanse of the dark and empty extraverse perfectly embodied the void of space and the comfort of home in one place. Though at the moment he was absent from it, leaving his throne of rubble and stone amongst the 4 other thrones of the acting emissaries empty. Life, the elegant bird-like creature from another world, sat accompanied by her companion Death, dark and brooding. Time, the mother of the extraverse, a celestial being of great magnitude, sat in her throne of churning gold beside the master of plasma, Celeste, an imposing force, and a celestial being similar to Time, whose space-like body shifted from a greenish blue to dark green. Behind the emissary sat a forgotten and long-abandoned throne that Time insisted no one speak of. Why must we not tell him? Or anyone, for that matter? Why can he not know? I know not of what you speak. Time rested her chin on her fist as she leaned forward. She was entirely aware of what Celeste was referring to. Of the empty throne. Of, do not speak his name. Time scolded Celeste. His relevance only makes him stronger, like you and I. They shall not know. They shall never know. How can the Sentinel or the Paradox Master do what they must to protect the universe if they do not know everything they need to know? Mother, they do not know who Rogar fought for. They do not know of Ray or who he truly sides with, nor of the mere existence of Siriv or the Saren. Kranthar is but a footnote in history to them. They know not of the original war and their army that failed to stop him. They must know. They will not. Time disagreed. They were speaking of something very secretive and close to them, so life and death stayed out of it, though they knew the secrets too. Why not? What do we have to lose? Celeste blared. Dignity, Time yelled. We will not be seen in a poor light. We are gods. We are nothing of the sort, Celeste yelled. Tell them the truth. Tell who what exactly? The Paradox Master asked as he entered the extraverse. Celeste remained silent, cowering in his throne, away from Time. Precisely. Time looked toward Celeste. You do not want to be associated with it either. I see it. I feel it within you. I do not value my pride as much as you, Time. Celeste growled. Where were you? Life asked the Paradox Master. What were you doing? Visited Earth, my old place. Just dropped by to check in on the Sentinel, who's an idiot, I'll tell you that much. The Paradox Master smiled. His smile faded as he turned to face Time. Looks like our bad decisions are catching up to us. Time travel won't save us in the extraverse. There's no timeline trickery you can pull like you did with me. The Sentinel's made his decisions. It's begun. August 17th, 3053. Old York City, Old York. The 5th Sentinel sat down in his throne on a dead planet in the ruins of his lab. He had accomplished what he felt he needed to do as the Paradox Master. Rogar had been killed, the Alliance had fallen, and the Terrors fled. The Galactic War was finally over. Everything he had done led to this moment, and now a decision needed to be made. He sat down in his throne of rubble, inspecting his time machine. What kind of Sentinel am I? He asked it. You should know, the box responded. That's the problem. The Sentinel lowered his head onto the box. I don't. What do I do? He closed his eyes. What do you think is best to do? Do you embrace death, fear it, or laugh in the face of it? The Sentinel took a deep breath. He thought about his options. He chuckled, then muttered the words, Code 6. In an instant, the box exploded violently, consuming the Sentinel in its fantastic purple flames. He started to phase, the same way he did 5 times before. It was excruciatingly painful, and for a moment the Sentinel felt regret. He seemed to be doing this for nothing but principle. He fell to the floor, a different man again. His once dark brown hair was now a poofy mess of dirty blonde hair obstructing his vision. His hands came to the side of his head, feeling the new thick sideburns that fell over the side of his ears. He could feel the stubble on his once smooth chin and his now wide nose. He stood up quickly, pushing his arms out for balance. Okay? He spoke to himself reassuringly. Why did I do that? He held his hands to his head and stared at the broken pieces of the box lying on the floor. Oh my god, he groaned, pinching the bridge of his nose. Did I really just do that because I could? I laugh in the face of death, so I just go and phase myself for no reason whatsoever? The Sentinel paced around the pieces of his broken time machine. Idiot! He held his fist to his chin, stopping in front of a break in the wall. Well, at least I don't have to be the Paradox Master anymore. He stared over the vast ocean expanse of the dead Earth. How do I get out of here? I can answer that. A voice beckoned behind him. Jeez! The Sentinel turned around, startled by the surprise visitor. Knock next time. His eyes widened when he was met with the face of his visitor. The Paradox Master stared at the Sentinel, eyeballing his outfit, identical to his own. Alright, well, one of us is going to have to change or this is going to be awkward. Why are you here? The Sentinel questioned, stumbling away from the throne, his new legs slightly trembling. Remember when I told you that there were alternate versions of you? The Paradox Master looked up at the sky. Yeah, the Sentinel stared back at the Paradox Master suspiciously. Well, you just became the version of us that decided to laugh in the face of death. I know for a fact that you had Code 5 programmed in there just in case you changed your mind at the last minute. You know what was supposed to happen. You just broke the cycle. So what? Who does that make you? The Sentinel asked the Paradox Master, pacing around him slowly. I just decided to keep on living. I showed up at the Extraverse and they gave me a job, so now I'm no longer a Sentinel. I'm the true Paradox Master. All the things you didn't or forgot to do that you remember the Paradox Master doing in your time, that was me. That still doesn't explain why you're here, the Sentinel squinted at him. I mean, you did just blow up your time machine, the Paradox Master pointed out. Bit of a dumb move if you ask me. So you came to help? The Sentinel asked. Not really, the Paradox Master admitted. I came to warn you. Of? The Sentinel stopped pacing. What you and I did to avoid completing the cycle has consequences. Had, actually. 2 choices made against the current that had consequences that rippled through time and dimensions, and I'm basically in charge of cleaning it up. But it's a big job, big multiverse. I'm not too sure I can take care of it on my own. Don't relax now that the war is over. Keep on your toes. The Paradox Master turned away. Wait! The Sentinel held out his hand. What? The Paradox Master seemed annoyed. Are you going to help me? The Sentinel asked. The Paradox Master smiled and vanished in a flash. The Sentinel stepped back, annoyed, and shook his head. Jerk, he muttered to himself. Now what? He knelt down by the destroyed pieces of the box, admiring them. His eye was drawn to what seemed to be the only surviving Rev stone from within the box. He picked it up and held it to his ear, listening to its faint whispers, hoping that it would be Amara's. I did too. Matrona's, he concluded. He stood up and stepped back. He glanced at the red leather jacket he wore and nodded, siding with the Paradox Master. He slid it off and threw it over the edge of the poorly constructed rubble throne. He held out the Rev stone in front of him and focused. A wormhole opened in front of him. He peered into the portal to see if the destination was safe. The first glimpse he caught was of snow. He could hear the faint sounds of horses' hooves clopping against cobblestone. I can work with this. He shrugged and stepped into the wormhole, which promptly closed behind him. He stood in the snow of Victorian-era London. A horse-drawn carriage passed him by as he stood, shivering in the street. He made his way to the sidewalk. A woman in a large frilly dress holding an umbrella passed by and scoffed at him. Should have made the Paradox Master change, the Sentinel whispered to himself as he shivered in the cold. He continued along his way until he came across a well-dressed drunkard passed out, leaning against a building. The Sentinel stole the man's coat, putting it on. He took the top hat, too, for good measure. First a cowboy and now this, the Sentinel mumbled. He spotted a brass band playing, and he stopped to listen. As the band played, he thought about his situation, pondering his future. The war was over, and yet he wasn't happy. He had no home, it seemed. He could have gone back to the lab, but that was destroyed. He thought about returning to the Tempest house, but the thought of Amara weighed deeply in his heart, and his guilt crushed him. So, his mind drifted from the thought of her. He wondered what Vax was up to. If the war really was over, which all signs pointed to that being the case, what would stop the Sentinel from simply staying in London? He continued wondering what it would be like to just drop his old life and live one there. And then it dawned on him. What was stopping him? It had been a year since the Sentinel had made the decision to stay in London. Wanting to leave his old life behind where he had last phased, he dropped the moniker of the Sentinel. In a way, he had died and started anew. He decided to call himself AJ again, not wanting to go back to being Adam. Adjusting to a normal life was weird, especially in an era he was unfamiliar with. AJ spent the first year in London living his life as a homeless man, waiting until he had enough money to buy himself something to live in. He eventually bought and stole himself enough materials to build a small living space that, when all was said and done, was nothing more than a shack. The shack was a measly construction of wood and stones, just large enough to fit a bed and workbench. The roof was simplistic and flat, adorned with a lamp that looked identical to his first ever design for the box. The lamp peeked over the roof and into the ceiling. Just because he was no longer the Sentinel didn't mean he couldn't be a little nostalgic. His plan for living from that point forward was to use the shack as a base of operations to tinker and build things to sell to the rich. He made sure not to make anything too revolutionary or ahead of its time, to avoid messing with the time stream and drawing the Paradox Master's attention. Another year had passed. He read hundreds of books in his free time, and when he wasn't reading, he was spending long nights out on the town. Only regular customers knew him, and for once, he was widely unimportant. He had almost forgotten what it was like to be a Sentinel. Though every night, when he lay down to rest in his ramshackle bed, before he reached up to pull on the hanging chain that turned off his lamp, he stared at the orange and yellow light. He admired the design that reminded him of his past. He couldn't resist. His plans for tinkering grew more ambitious. He had his eyes set back on time travel, but he always justified that it would never lead back to a life of a Sentinel. He would attempt to recreate his time machine using the only casing that was available to him, an old pocket watch that he acquired from the pocket of the coat he'd stolen 2 years prior. Despite the scarcity of parts and the non-existent technology he would need for such an undertaking, he managed to scrounge up enough scrap to make an attempt. He held out the pocket watch, in hopes that it would at the very least teleport him. It sparked and caught fire in his hands. He quickly cupped his hands over the watch to put out the flames and put the pocket watch down on his workbench. He glanced outside of his window for a moment. The winter's snow obscured his vision, but he could have sworn that he had seen a wormhole open. Had he done it? He stepped outside. A man stood up and oriented himself after a fall through a wormhole onto the roof. AJ couldn't believe his eyes. The man was him, in his last incarnation, standing on the roof of his neighbor's home. He remembered this, all the wormholes he had been through in the Battle of Janistar just a few years ago. The box and Amara flashed in next to the fifth incarnation of the Sentinel on the roof. "What just happened?" Amara asked, looking around through the snow. AJ jumped back at the sight of her. "Wormholes," Five answered. "Where even are we?" Amara asked. "Victorian London," the box answered. "So it's that kind of day, isn't it?" Five asked as he and Amara flashed away with the box. AJ shook his head. Then he held his hands to his hips, smiling. Having just looked through a window into his past, he was remembering it all. He shook his head. No. Don't let it convince you. It's like a pop-up ad. It's just trying to trick you. Don't listen. He turned around, prepared to go back into his shack and have another try at his pocket watch. But before he could enter, what sounded like the strike of lightning caught his attention. He didn't think the snowfall was a storm. When he turned around, he was caught off guard, more so than he had been about his past self showing up. What the hell? Standing on the roof where Five and Amara had just been was a majestic wolf-like creature that glowed purple with strong plasmatic fur, sparking with residual electricity. The creature seemed strange and out of touch, sniffing the air and getting acclimated to its surroundings. Its fur was broken up by ridges of scales along the fronts of its legs and snout and across the ridge of its spine and fluffy tail. It turned its head. AJ could now see what looked to be a star-shaped revstone in his forehead. "Hey!" AJ called out. "You can't be up there! Someone will see you! You'll mess up the time stream!" "A traveler." The wolf creature turned its head to AJ. Its voice seemed to project itself into AJ's mind telepathically. "May I speak with you?" he asked. "Yeah, sure," AJ called out. "Just get down from there before someone sees you." The creature jumped down from the roof and landed in front of AJ with a thud. He looked around, seemingly admiring his surroundings. "You have the markings of a traveler. What may I call you?" the creature asked him. "AJ," he answered as he led the creature into the shack. The small building was just big enough to house the wolf, which, when the sentinel looked at him more carefully, reminded him more of a dog. The creature sat down in the middle of the building and wagged his tail. "Who are you?" the sentinel asked. "You may call me Starlock. I, too, am a traveler. A historian, more specifically. I visit places where wormholes have been opened and study them. This is my first trip to Earth. Where might you be from?" "Earth, the 70s originally. The 2070s, AJ answered. He had calmed down more, knowing that Starlock was peaceful. "You?" "Modius. The 80s. 1980s. When is this?" "The 80s. 1880. You aren't too far off. I wouldn't stay around much longer. You might mess things up if someone sees you." AJ walked around Starlock into his workbench, barely squeezing by him in the small shack. "I want to learn about this place," Starlock explained. "I've got plenty of books. Can you read?" AJ asked. "I can." Starlock nodded. "Can you help me with something?" AJ asked. "Yes, of course," Starlock nodded. "A traveler always helps a fellow traveler." "I've been trying to build a time machine. My last one broke and I've been stuck here. I don't plan on leaving," AJ insisted. "I just don't like being stuck in one place for too long. I've been itching to travel recently. Here in the past, I don't have access to the tech I need." "Open your eyes, human," Starlock teased. "Technology is not what you need. It's ingenuity." "You could help with that?" AJ asked. "Immensely." Starlock smiled as the stone in his forehead glowed passively. AJ had finally made a friend, albeit a strange one. He didn't plan on getting too attached, as Starlock had let it be known that he would leave to explore more on his own. He was just passing by. AJ set down ground rules, letting it be known to Starlock that he was to not leave the shack under any circumstances. Every night, AJ slept on the bed, and Starlock slept curled up on the floor like a dog, though he didn't seem to mind. The two of them tinkered for months. AJ used the Revstone as an essential piece in the pocket watch time machine. Starlock supplied him with further knowledge on how to use common materials to manipulate time, among other things. Starlock stayed longer than he anticipated, as AJ had much knowledge to share about the Galactic War and events surrounding it, as well as basic Earth history. With the extra help, Starlock returned the favor and helped AJ tinker with more inventions. AJ eventually made a special cube machine. It was blue and green, about the size of the box, but it wasn't a time machine. He would use his pocket watch time machine to occasionally visit a place with a strange machine he built, but never telling Starlock what for. One day, AJ decided to ask Starlock about something he thought he would know much about. "Hey, Star?" "Yes?" Starlock lifted his head from the ground where he had been napping. His tail started to wag. "Do you know anything about plasma?" AJ asked. "Why, yes, I do. How do you know?" "You're an original, aren't you? I had a hunch, Dragolupus, right? You know, I was trained by a Gar. He taught me everything I know, but he wasn't around long enough to teach me much else." AJ snapped his fingers, causing a spark to ignite a flame in his palm. "I don't want training, but I do want to know more about who I am. My power haunts me. It's haunted others." "A human?" Starlock chuckled. "Of all the beings to be a host to the multiverse's finest, you understand that plasma is alive, right?" "That's what my friend used to say." He seemed to be implying that was just the belief system. "Oh, no. Starlock shook his head. "No, that is what brings all of the originals together. We are all offshoots of the same life form, and it's that," Starlock said, pointing at the flame. "It's the reason you may have noticed your gain in physical strength and resilience. Plasma's like internal armor. That plasma lives within you. It knows what to do because you think it, but you never thought how. No. It's a psychic link, similar in how I can project my voice into your mind. The plasma lives inside you, and even after you die, it lives on. Sometimes it'll carry an essence of what was once its host body. Plasma can get clingy. It doesn't want to let go of the past, of its friend. Can I get rid of it? AJ asked. Can I get it out of me and forget my past? Why would you ever want to? Starlock asked. AJ hesitated. He didn't want to let Starlock into his life as a Sentinel. He didn't want to get him involved in another conflict and regret it. Never mind. Starlock squinted. Those years in London soon became 3, and then 4. AJ had nothing keeping him in London. He had no friends aside from Starlock, nor did he have any attachment to his home. Nothing was stopping him from leaving, only the fact that those 4 years had given him time to think. He wondered, were all the bad things that happened to him and those he loved while he was the Sentinel his fault? These questions plagued him during those years and throughout the construction of his new time machine. Though, he always planned on getting back to his antics eventually. He knew he wouldn't or couldn't ever stay in London for the rest of his life. He assumed that one day he would stumble across someone that would spark his adventurous side. Another Vax, or another Amara, someone that would prompt him to use his time machine to show them the stars. But that never happened, of course. Starlock was the closest it came, but being a time traveler himself, there wasn't any adventure in it for AJ. He had convinced himself that even if he did travel with Starlock, it would never stay as just little adventures like he had first intended. Something bigger was in store for him, he reasoned, and it was better that he didn't get anyone else involved. Nearing the 4-year anniversary of when AJ decided to live in London, Starlock was called back to his planet. It was his time to go. It was good knowing you, AJ. Starlock bowed. You too, Star. I've gone crazy stuck here with no one. AJ smiled. Thank you. He looked down as he opened the door to the shack. Where are you off to now? Back home, I guess. Starlock looked up at him. I've been a bit cave-sick. It'll be nice to get back to Modius. I'm going to miss you, my traveler friend. Starlock's ears drooped. Hey, who knows? Maybe we'll meet again. Starlock's tail wagged. Maybe. He turned his head down and looked outside. The stone in his forehead glowed as his fur sparked with electricity. Soon his whole body vanished like a bolt of lightning out the door. And with that, he was gone. Back to his time. AJ took a deep breath and turned around, facing the pocket watch on his workbench. He picked up the blue and green cube machine next to it. It shrunk to about 1 inch by 1 inch, and he put the little cube in his pocket. He held out his pocket watch in front of him and closed his eyes. In a jittery flash of broken light, he teleported away. Gasping for air as he appeared at his destination, something was wrong. He fell to his knees, his top hat fell off, and he dropped the watch, which cracked on the sidewalk. The glow of the revstone shone through it, and he put the watch away in his pocket. He looked around, picking up his hat. He wasn't where he intended to be. He looked down at his pocket and talked to the pocket watch like it was the box. I didn't ask for here, why here? In his new surroundings, AJ admired the tall skyscrapers and looked down the long, congested roads in the city. Crowds of people surrounded him, but went past him, unseeing. He stepped by the side of the sidewalk and hailed a taxi. He stepped in, winded by the abrupt change in scenery and time. After a lengthy pause without speaking, the taxi driver broke the awkward silence. So, where to, sir? AJ hesitated, staring out the window of the car. That depends on what year it is. What year? Are you crazy? It's 2055. The taxi driver seemed confused. He began counting time on the taximeter, waiting for AJ. 55. AJ seemed to be calculating things in his mind, counting on his fingers, and trying to figure out what relevance the year had to him. Okay, where are we exactly? Are you out of your mind? LA, obviously. Come on, man, I don't have all day. Where to? The driver shifted to taxiing to drive. Alright, in that case, Virginia, AJ answered. The road, right? The driver pulled into the traffic. No, the state, AJ answered nonchalantly. Ha. The driver shook his head, forcing a smile before it quickly faded as he made eye contact with AJ from the rearview mirror. He could see the serious look on his face. Get out, he demanded. AJ looked at his hand and did something he hadn't done in a while. He snapped his fingers, igniting a spark. He lifted his hand in the view of the mirror and enlarged the burning purple flame around his fist, not flinching as it grew. He admired the flaming fist and met eye contact with the driver again. Take me to Virginia, he commanded calmly. The driver sped up and turned his eyes nervously to the road. He was nervous and quiet for the duration of the long ride before he stopped on the side of a desert road. Look, man, I'm assuming you aren't going to pay, which is fine by me because of your freak powers, he said. But I really gotta go home. How far did you take me? AJ asked. Flagstaff, Arizona, the driver answered. It's as far as I'll go. Thanks. AJ stepped from the taxi and watched as it sped off. With all the time AJ spent in the 1800s, he decided he needed to refamiliarize himself with 2055 again and take a break from travel for the time being. He stepped into a bar and listened in on the news playing from the TVs. A news reporter droned, Plans for a Martian colony have been cut short yet again due to increased seismic activity on the planet. Yeah, it's probably for the best, AJ thought to himself quietly. He didn't stay long in Flagstaff. He took another taxi as far as the driver would allow, this time to Albuquerque, New Mexico. AJ didn't sleep. He wanted to get to Virginia as fast as possible. He stopped for a while at another bar. He walked around, admiring the pictures on the wall. He scanned over the typical poorly shot pictures of customers eating extremely hot chicken wings or autographed photos of marginally famous people that visited standing next to the bar owner. He eventually came across a picture of a couple of familiar faces. He glanced over it at first like any of the others, but quickly shot his head back to it. He knew those faces. Intrigued, he asked the bartender when the photo was taken. "Oh, this place was booming in the 60s, I'll tell you what," he responded to AJ's question, interrupting himself to serve another customer. "That one was, 65, I think? My gramp said those guys were regulars, real into talent night back when we had that." AJ continued looking at the picture. The first Sentinel and the Paradox Master stood next to each other, singing into a shared microphone. The Sentinel squinted and saw yet another familiar face. Whenever a Kogar transformed into his human form, it was always the same, and he stood by, watching his friends. "How long were they regulars?" AJ asked. "About 5 years, coming at least once a month they did. Last time one of them came in, it was that fella." The bartender pointed to the Paradox Master. "All alone. After that, they never came back. But Gramps was good friends with them too, at least he said so. So wonder where they went off to." "Right." AJ continued looking at the picture. "Thank you." He nodded at the bartender. An early morning taxi drive led AJ to his next stop in Amarillo, Texas, where he immediately took his next chance for a taxi ride. He doodled on a napkin the whole drive to the next stop. He drew designs for a new box and drew planets and stars. He slept as much as he could until the ride stopped in Springfield, Missouri. Again, he waited for another taxi and tried to get as far as he could, only persuading the driver to go as far as the Missouri border at Oakville. From there, AJ tried hitchhiking his way, but with no luck. He slept on a bench that night, and in the morning was lucky enough to find someone left money for him in his hat. He got some food, hailed another taxi, and got as far as Louisville, Kentucky. He took another taxi from there directly to Torreglion, Virginia. When he arrived at the edge of the quaint town that night, he had to adjust and prepare himself. He knew where he was headed and what he would do next, but he didn't know exactly how his visitor would react. He took a deep breath and stepped through the gates of the town. He marched up the cobblestone path leading to the plaza and quickly turned back into the narrow walkways, heading forward with a purpose and stopping suddenly in front of the door of the Tempest house. The wind passed him softly, as did the occasional firefly, and the sounds of the crowds in the nearby plaza droned on, subtly fading away as AJ tuned them out, but the sounds of crickets remained. He lifted his hand, hesitated for a moment, and knocked. It had been 2 years since the house had any visitors. The door opened after a few short moments, and AJ was met with a familiar face. Ayla stood before him in a coffee-stained t-shirt. Her hair was done up in a messy bun. She groaned and yawned, rubbing her eyes as she asked, "What do you want?" AJ walked past her and stared into the home, which was left a mess. The shattered glass coffee table still had yet to be replaced, and Amara's door was left open. The Sentinel sat down on a kitchen stool. "Who do you think you are?" Ayla asked. She cautiously approached her couch and reached her hand in between the cushions. "I didn't even think about you not recognizing me," AJ admitted, lowering his head into his arms on the counter. Ayla retrieved a pistol from the couch and cocked it back. AJ heard the noise and turned around. "Hey!" He held out his hands. He snapped his finger and a small plasmatic flame sparked at his fingertips. Ayla stumbled back, not used to seeing plasma. Her eyes widened as she realized, lowering her pistol as she spoke in disbelief. "Sentinel?" "Yeah." AJ lowered his hand slowly. He pursed his lips in a quasi-smile before breathing out, exasperated. He dropped his head down on the counter. Damn it. He hadn't heard himself called the Sentinel in a long, long time. It stung. "Where were you? What happened? It's been 2 years," Ayla mumbled confusedly. "Why are you here? Why now?" Ayla tried looking for meaning in AJ's arrival. "I'm sorry about Amara." His eyes looked up at Ayla without moving his head. "She died fighting, though, if that's any consolation. And the war ended, too. Not now, not in 2055, in 3053, I think." "Sentinel." Ayla tried to comfort him. She couldn't quite put together the words in her mind to tell him that it was okay. "Please don't call me that. Look, I'll get out of here. I don't know why I came here for help. You don't deserve all this." AJ slid from his stool. "I'm sorry, I sort of expected help from you." "I'll help you. You can stay as long as you need before you're ready to go. What do you need?" "No, it's fine, really," AJ insisted. "I can see that it's not," Ayla argued. "What do you need?" "My time machine's broken. I'm not sure if the universe needs me anymore, but I feel like I should have it regardless. I was hoping that you maybe kept all my old stuff." "I did." Ayla seemed relieved. "Was actually expecting you to come back. I thought it was a smart idea to keep your stuff around. Ayla stuttered, swallowing a lump in her throat before continuing. It's in Amara's room." AJ paused for a moment and nodded. He made his way to Amara's room, mouthing the words, "Thank you." He stopped at the hallway. He looked up to the stairs at the balcony. He turned his head to see the door of Amara's empty room ajar. He entered, sitting down on the bed, looking almost exactly as it had the day he left. The wall was still poorly patched up with plasma. AJ held his head, feeling a short, sharp pain. He took off his coat and made himself comfortable. The moonlight shone on the sheets, and he closed his eyes, using the sheets to dry his tears. The next morning, AJ opened the closet and found all of his equipment and spare parts lying on the floor in front of him. It was time to get to work. Sometimes things never change. It was time to be a Sentinel again.